I'm Marley, 36, female. Growing up wasn't the easiest journey for Cora and me. Our parents passed away when we were very young, and I had to step into the role of being a parent to my younger sister. It was a responsibility I took on with pride and determination. I had to be strong for her, and I never wanted Cora to feel like she was alone in this world. I remember the days when I was a waitress struggling to make ends meet while taking care of my sister. It was during that time I met Andreas. He was charming, kind, and we hit it off instantly. We exchanged numbers and started dating when I was 24, and everything felt perfect. Life seemed to be taking a turn for the better, and I felt like I could finally provide for my sister and give her a safe, stable home with the help of my boyfriend. But it didn't take long for the cracks in our relationship to start showing. You see, Cora knew about Andreas, and they would often hang out together. I watched as Cora playfully flirted with him, and my heart ached, but I tried to ignore it. I couldn't bear the thought of making a fuss. Cora was used to getting herself into trouble, with arrests for petty crimes like being drunk in public and public indecency. Despite the warning signs, I couldn't help but condone her actions. I still saw her as the little girl I needed to protect, the sister who depended on me. Andreas would often tell me that I was too lenient, too forgiving of her antics. He said I needed to let Cora grow up and stand on her own 2 feet, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Time flew by, and when I turned 30, Andreas finally popped the question. We had a lovely wedding, and for a while it seemed like everything was falling into place. We were excited to start our married life together, and it was time for me to move in with Andreas. However, the idea of me moving in with him didn't sit well with Cora. She was hesitant and didn't want to be alone, especially because she couldn't hold down a job or maintain a stable life on her own. It put me in a difficult position, as I still felt that responsibility to take care of her. My heart ached for my sister, and I wanted to make sure she was okay. But Andreas had a different perspective. He firmly believed that we needed to focus on our marriage without any distractions or added responsibilities. He urged me to be more assertive and put my foot down, setting boundaries and prioritizing our relationship. He insisted that he didn't fully understand the complexities of our past, but stressed that we needed to put our marriage first. I struggled with the decision, torn between my loyalty to my sister and my love for Andreas. But as our arguments continued, I realized I had to choose. In the end, Andreas gave up on the matter, seeing how torn I was. He understood that I couldn't bear the thought of leaving my sister in a difficult situation, and he decided to allow Cora to move in with us. It was a relief in many ways, but the decision also stirred a sense of unease. I had chosen my sister's well-being over my marriage, and I knew it had consequences. I wasn't sure if Andreas was fully satisfied with the resolution, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had let him down. It was a heavy burden to carry, and I feared it might take a toll on our relationship. 2 years had passed since Cora moved in with Andreas and me, and the harmony in our home had deteriorated drastically. Cora's behavior had become a constant source of tension. She was often rowdy, sneaking men into the house at night, causing disturbances in the neighborhood and just generally being disruptive. Her disregard for our home and the people living in it was evident through her messy habits, leaving her dishes strewn about and refusing to take out the trash. Andreas was at the end of his patience. He'd often tell me to address my sister's reckless behavior, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of frustration building inside me as well. Every time I confronted Cora, she'd apologize for her actions and promise to be a better housemate. For a few weeks, it seemed like she genuinely tried to change, but it never lasted. She'd quickly revert to her toxic ways, leaving Andreas even more infuriated. One evening, the situation came to a head. We were all at each other's throats, and our home had turned into a battleground. We were all angry and yelling. It was a huge, painful fight, and I found myself torn between my husband and my sister. Cora, we've reached a breaking point here. Your behavior is causing too much chaos in this house. Andreas, please understand that Cora has had a tough life and she's trying her best. You wouldn't understand. I get it, Arlie, but we're all adults here and she needs to start acting like one. I can't keep living in this environment. Please, Andreas, don't kick me out. I promise I can do better. I'll change. Just give me a chance. Please. Cora, it's been 2 years and we've tried this before. Your promises haven't held up. I need peace in my home, Arlie. And we can't have that with Cora's actions. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Andreas, I understand, but she's my sister. She's been through a lot and I can't just throw her out. We need to give her a little more time to adjust. Arlie, I'm so sorry for everything. Please don't let me go. I promise I'll change. Please, just one more chance. I promise I'll make things right this time. After a lengthy and emotionally charged discussion, I proposed a compromise. I suggested that Cora could remain in the house if she managed to secure and maintain a stable job and started contributing to the household expenses. Andreas seemed to favor the idea, and I believed it was mainly because he assumed it wouldn't last. In his mind, this would be the final straw, giving him a legitimate reason to evict Cora without further arguments. I promise, Arlie, I'll do whatever it takes to make this work. Thank you both for giving me another chance. We believe in you, Cora, and we want this to work. All right. We'll give this a shot, but you better be ready to work hard and prove yourself. Thank you, Andreas, and I think it'll be a great idea if you take Cora on at the shop. It's a way for you two to bond and get to know each other. We all need to work on our relationships. I don't like that idea, but I'll give it a try. But, Cora, you better be prepared to work hard. Thank you both so much. I promise I won't let you down. We can make this work. For the next month, life seemed to be on an upswing. Cora was learning the ropes at the mechanic shop, being less reckless and helping out more around the house. Andreas, though initially skeptical, was becoming more patient. And the tension between him and Cora was gradually easing. It was a time of relative peace for all of us. As a couple of months passed, I couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling that something was amiss. It became increasingly apparent that Cora and Andreas were growing closer, much more than I had initially anticipated. At first, I brushed off my discomfort, reminding myself that it was my own desire for them to get along that had set this course of events in motion. However, I couldn't help but notice that their interactions seemed to take on a different tone. It became evident to me that Andreas was not just being friendly with Cora. He was reciprocating her flirtatious behavior. One night, I decided to address this with my husband, hoping for reassurance. I expressed my feelings, explaining that his behavior was making me uncomfortable. In response, Andreas argued that I was being hypocritical, questioning why I had never told Cora to stop when I had encouraged their newfound friendship. This accusation left me second-guessing myself, wondering if I was indeed overreacting. The next day, I gathered the courage to talk to Cora about her flirtatious behavior. I explained how her actions made me feel, but instead of understanding my concerns, she dismissed them. Cora insisted that I was overreacting and needed to be grateful that she and Andreas were now friends, instead of enemies. It was as if my concerns were invalid and I was being unreasonable. Cora, I've noticed that you and Andreas have been getting quite close lately. I just want to express how it's making me uncomfortable. Arlie, you're totally overreacting. It's not a big deal. We become friends, and that's a good thing. But it's not just friendship, Cora. I've seen the flirting and the playful interactions. It's making me feel like I'm being pushed aside. Come on, sis. You know I've always been a bit flirtatious, and Andreas is just being friendly back. Besides, it's better for us all to get along. I know you're a flirt, Cora, but this feels different. It's creating tension between Andreas and me. I need you to tone it down. You're blowing this out of proportion, Arlie. You've always taken care of me, and now you're happily married. It's time for me to have some fun and not be a burden on you. Cora, it's not about being a burden. It's about boundaries. I just need you to respect the boundaries in our relationship. It's causing issues between Andreas and me. Despite my growing discomfort, I chose to drop the issue, even though I couldn't help but harbor a budding resentment towards both Andreas and Cora. The situation was further complicated by the fact that Cora was now working for Andreas, and I no longer liked the idea of her being in such close proximity to him. I suggested that Cora find a new job, but she refused, claiming that she enjoyed her current position. Our discussions on this matter often ended in heated arguments, and when I turned to Andreas for support, he questioned why I was surprised by Cora's behavior when it had been her nature all along. I felt like I was being isolated and misunderstood in my own home. I was at work when I got the call. My neighbor sounded panicked, telling me there was a fire in our house and that she had already called the fire department. But she was afraid that Andreas and Cora might still be inside. The world seemed to spin and my heart raced with fear. I rushed back home, leaving my bewildered customers behind. When I arrived, I saw smoke coming from our charred home and firefighters fighting the flames. I couldn't see Andreas or Cora anywhere. My mind raced with fear. I approached our neighbor, asking with dread in my voice, "Did they get out? Where are they?" I couldn't bear the thought of them being trapped inside. The firefighters kept me away from the burning house, reminding me that it was too dangerous. All I could do was wait, feeling helpless. As the firefighters battled the flames, each passing minute felt like an eternity. I prayed for Andreas and Cora's safety, berating myself for not being there when they needed me the most. I wished I had done more to mend the growing rift between us. Finally, I saw Andreas, and he was being pulled out on a stretcher and covered in severe burns. I almost couldn't recognize him. I started screaming and wailing, asking how any of this could be possible. I asked the other firefighters about my sister, and they looked at me confused, saying that it was only one person they found in the fire, and that there were no remains or anything suggesting someone was burnt up in the fire. I remained by Andreas's side, the hospital room filled with the sterile scent of disinfectant and the beeping of machines, a constant reminder of his fragile state. Hours passed, feeling like an eternity, my heart aching with worry. The questions kept swirling in my mind, and I couldn't shake the fear that something terrible had happened to Cora. Finally, Andreas began to stir, his eyes fluttering open. He was disoriented, his face contorted with pain as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. When he saw me, relief washed over his eyes. "Andreas, oh, thank God you're awake. You're in the hospital. You had a fire at the house, but you're going to be okay." He tried to speak, but his throat was dry and raspy. I handed him a cup of water, and he sipped it carefully, grimacing with each swallow. Then he looked at me with a furrowed brow, as if he was searching his foggy memory. "Where's Cora? I've been trying to call her, but she's not answering. Do you remember anything? How did the fire start?" Andreas's face darkened with confusion. I don't know. The last thing I remember is spending the day with her and then falling asleep." The fear gripped my heart even tighter. If he had last seen Cora and now he was in the hospital, it didn't bode well. I felt a rush of desperation and helplessness, not knowing where my sister could be. Andreas's eyelids drooped and he drifted back to sleep, his frail body in the grip of exhaustion and pain. I stayed with him for a while longer, reassuring myself that he was on the path to recovery. As he slept, I made a decision. I had to file a missing persons report for Cora. It was terrifying to imagine what might have happened to her, especially given her recent behavior. But I had to find her, and I wouldn't rest until I did. She was family, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing her too. As the weeks passed and there was still no sign of Cora, the weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on my shoulders. Andreas was finally being discharged from the hospital, but our lives took a devastating turn. The doctors delivered the grim news that his legs had suffered severe burns, and it was highly likely that he would never walk again. The future we had imagined seemed to crumble before us. Andreas was devastated, and I knew that this would be a challenge we'd face together. Once we arrived in our new apartment that we had to rent out, I was determined to provide the best care for my husband. It was an overwhelming task, juggling his recovery and the persistent absence of my sister, but I would do whatever it took to support Andreas through this trying period. "You have to take care of me now. I'm so grateful for you and everything that you do. I love you, Arlie." Andreas, with his newfound disability, quickly adapted to a role that demanded my constant attention. He grew dependent on me, both physically and emotionally. And though I loved him and wanted to help him heal, the weight of it all began to wear me down. He kept on mentioning that I would need to care for him from now on, which only added to the mounting pressure I was under. I was dealing with my own depression, triggered by Cora's disappearance, the state of our house, and the uncertainty of it all, but I couldn't afford to wallow in my sadness. There were too many responsibilities resting on my shoulders. Then there was the matter of our insurance claim. The insurance company requested all video footage from our home security cameras to determine the fire's cause. I was too overwhelmed to handle the process, so I handed over the salvaged CCTV footage, hoping it would speed up the insurance claim. A few days later, I received a call from the insurance company, and their words hit me like a ton of bricks. They informed me that they wouldn't grant the insurance because there was evidence of recklessness leading to the fire's origin. It was a shock to my already shattered world. I had to gather the strength to watch the footage myself to see what had gone wrong, what reckless behavior had led to the fire, and the truth of what had happened that fateful night. Watching the video was a tortuous experience. As the footage played, I saw Andreas and Cora, of all people, cooking together in our kitchen. It was painful to witness, but I forced myself to keep watching. My heart sank as they grew closer, and before long they were entangled in a passionate embrace. My eyes welled up with tears as I struggled to process the betrayal before me. The scene unfolded further, growing more explicit, and they eventually made their way to our bed. I felt physically sick, but I had to see how deep this betrayal went. I watched with a heavy heart, knowing that I was about to uncover the depths of their deceit. After their intimate encounter, I witnessed Cora getting some coffee for Andreas, but my stomach turned when I saw her crushing his sleeping pills into it. My hands were trembling as I watched him consume the concoction, which would send him into a deep sleep. Cora then went through Andreas's pockets, stealing from him before packing her belongings and leaving the house. As if this wasn't enough, I saw the stove they had used for their cooking session remained on, and eventually it ignited and caused the fire that nearly destroyed our home. That's why the insurance company rejected our claim, saying that it was due to negligence, and I could see why they felt that way. My blood was boiling with anger and I needed answers. After composing myself, I approached Andreas with the video evidence. I confronted him, desperate for an explanation. He stuttered and tried to avoid facing the truth, but I refused to let him escape the gravity of his actions. Forced to watch the damning footage with him, Andreas's discomfort grew as the video played out the ultimate betrayal. When it reached the part where Cora had drugged his coffee with sleeping pills, he had the audacity to be offended. It was infuriating. The whole time he remained oblivious to the magnitude of his own betrayal. When the video concluded with Andreas being responsible for leaving the stove on and causing the fire, he broke down in tears, begging for my forgiveness. At that moment, all the pain, anger, and betrayal I had felt reached a boiling point. I spat on him, my voice trembling with rage, and said that I was glad Cora had stolen from him. I had no sympathy left for the man who had betrayed me and allowed my sister to take advantage of him. I also told him that I was glad that he was paralyzed, and I told him that he had better hire someone to take care of him because I was going to divorce him and leave him alone. Andreas kept on begging and whining, so I got up, grabbed the kettle, and poured boiling hot water on his crotch. He obviously was in agony, but I kept pouring, saying that if the rest of his body was burnt, it was only fair that the thing that caused this mess was burnt too. When I was done, I left him there crying, and I didn't feel bad one bit, because now my rage was turned towards my sister. I couldn't believe she was playing all of us, pretending to have turned a new leaf, when I guess this was her plan all along. I still can't believe she just left me like that. But it's okay, because I'm going to find her, and when I do, I'll make sure she never thinks to cross me again. Cora, if you're seeing this, I'm coming for you. I've played Mr. Nice Guy for way too long. It's time I enter my villain era and teach some people some well-deserved lessons. Growing up in a big family that prioritized family values and connecting was quite the experience. You see, my parents were missionaries and we often traveled to different places, adopting children along the way. I was born into this life, and from the moment I took my first breath, my family became an ever-expanding circle of diverse faces, all bound together by love. When I was just a year old, my parents brought in my adopted sister, Shirley, from Ghana. The difference in our backgrounds never mattered. She was my sister, plain and simple. In our large family, Shirley and I became the oldest by default, taking care of our younger siblings and helping each other navigate the joys and challenges of life. What was particularly interesting was that not many people outside our family knew that Shirley was adopted. She looked strikingly similar to me and her biological parents, which often left people clueless unless they asked. It was one of our little secrets, a testament to how love transcends blood. College life brought about new adventures and challenges, especially in the realm of relationships. While studying, Shirley and I met Wyatt, a sweet, charming guy who quickly made his way into our hearts. I fell for him, and he asked me out. Our love story began, and life was pretty great. I had a man who cared for me, and my sister was still my best friend. As the years rolled on, our relationship deepened, and it wasn't long before Wyatt proposed to me. The thought of building a life together filled us with excitement and dreams of a future we'd create side by side. But then something happened that would rock our relationship. One day, Wyatt decided it was time to share some aspects of his past that I hadn't known about. He began to reveal dark moments from his childhood, stories that painted a picture of a younger Wyatt I couldn't have imagined. It was shocking and sometimes horrifying, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit the image I had of the man I loved. His revelations about his past actions as a kid threw me for a loop, and I was left grappling with the newfound knowledge. While I knew that everyone had their share of youthful mistakes, what he shared was far from significant. It was as if the man I thought I knew had kept an entire chapter of his life hidden from me, and the secrets he had harbored for so long suddenly became our shared burden. I wasn't sure how to react, but I knew that we'd need to have some serious discussions and perhaps seek professional help to navigate through this storm. The truths Wyatt had unveiled had left our relationship in uncharted territory, and I couldn't help but wonder how it would all play out. After Wyatt had shared his dark past, I was torn between my love for him and the new, unsettling knowledge I now possessed. I hoped that my feelings for him would be strong enough to overcome my fear of the things he had done as a child. Surely people could change, right? The details he revealed about his behavior were alarming. This wasn't just a case of a kid who sometimes engaged in bullying or harmless mischief. Wyatt's actions had been severe enough that he had been admitted to the psychiatric ward at least 3 times before he turned 18. He was one of those kids who displayed signs of having the potential to cause real damage to property and people. I tried to move past it and understand that people grow and change as they get older. After all, he hadn't displayed any such behavior since I had met him. Still, the knowledge of his past strained our relationship. I was anxious, unable to fully shake the fear of what he was capable of. At some point, Wyatt sensed that something was amiss, and he asked if everything was okay between us. I broke down, my emotions overwhelming me, and I confessed that it was challenging to see past his dark past. This admission made him angry, and he regretted ever revealing his secrets to me, which we reached a breaking point, even contemplating calling off the wedding. But Shirley, my ever-supportive sister and good friend, stepped in. She convinced us to work through our differences and get married, reasoning that we loved each other enough to face any challenges together. Her words helped us regain perspective, and we resolved our differences and proceeded with the wedding. For a while, everything seemed fine and our love felt as strong as ever, but as time passed, I began to notice subtle changes in Wyatt's behavior towards me. He started being rude without reason, shouting at me over trivial matters, and generally becoming difficult to be around. I was left wondering what had caused this shift in his attitude and how to address it. It seemed like the demons from his past had resurfaced, and I couldn't help but wonder how this new chapter in our lives would play out, because I didn't sign up for any of this. Our relationship continued to unravel, marked by Wyatt's erratic behavior and the tension that lingered in the air. I couldn't ignore the sudden change any longer, and I began confronting him, asking him what was fueling his anger. But every time I tried, he shut me out, stubbornly refusing to talk about it. Then, one day, it all came crashing down. Wyatt exploded, his anger boiling over, and he revealed the real reason behind his outbursts. He was still furious with me for harshly judging him based on his troubled past. The words he hurled at me were a raw expression of his deep-seated hurt and resentment. I felt an overwhelming wave of guilt wash over me. How could I have misjudged him, causing him so much pain? I began apologizing profusely, assuring him that I had long moved past my initial judgments and that my love for him remained unwavering. And that's when Wyatt dropped another bombshell. He had been confiding in Shirley about his feelings and the strain in our relationship, and they had grown closer throughout the years. The revelation left me feeling a mix of emotions. I was surprised that he had spoken to Shirley about our problems, but even more puzzled that my sister hadn't mentioned anything to me. As I reflected on our situation, I realized that I was doing the same thing. During our worst arguments, I would lean on Shirley for support, confiding in her about the struggles Wyatt and I were facing. Now, I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal, wondering why Shirley hadn't told me about Wyatt's concerns and feelings. After all, we were sisters, and I had hoped that she would be a mediator to help us navigate our issues. I decided to address this with Shirley. It was time to clear the air, rebuild the trust that had been shaken, and try to make sense of what was happening in our lives. I couldn't bear the thought of losing the bond we had as sisters, and I wanted to find a way to heal the growing rift between Wyatt and me. I couldn't contain my frustration any longer, and it was time to address the elephant in the room with Shirley. I had to understand why she hadn't told me about Wyatt talking to her. After all, we were sisters, and sisters shared everything, right? So Wyatt told me something interesting. What did he tell you? Are you two fighting again? Yeah, we are, and apparently he's been telling you about us and our fights. Oh, yeah. Is there a problem? Well, yeah. Why didn't you tell me about Wyatt confiding in you? Shirley hesitated, her expression guarded. I didn't think it was necessary. I wanted to be a neutral party in this situation. I frowned, perplexed. But we're sisters, Shirley. We've always been each other's confidants. I thought we shared everything. So I'm not allowed to be closer to people other than you? That's not what I'm saying. I don't know. I just thought that you would have talked to me because we're sisters. We're close. She sighed and then looked me straight in the eyes, and what she said cut deep. Sally, I'm actually closer to Wyatt, if I'm being honest. Her words hung in the air, a heavy silence surrounding us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Shirley closer to Wyatt than me? Her own sister? My mind raced, trying to process it all. I spoke with a mix of sadness and discomfort. When did that happen? Well, we've always been pretty close. You forget we used to hang out all together. No, I was there, I remember. I just didn't know you two hung out, like exclusively. Yeah, well, it's been happening, and we've been hanging out a lot. I hang out with him more than you do, actually. Oh, well, this is news to me. Why haven't I seen you two hanging out together? Why am I only hearing of this now, Shirley? Look, I don't know what to tell you. This is just how things are. It's not like I love him more than you. Love him? In a friendly way, I mean. Jeez, relax. He's like a brother to me. I mean, he's literally my brother-in-law and my best friend. Our relationship isn't better. It's just different. But you just said you were closer to him. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that I don't love you. Shirley, you're talking in circles. No, I'm not. I don't know what your problem is anyway. My problem is that my sister and my husband are hanging out without me. Oh, come on, Sally. You're being dramatic as usual. We just hang out a lot. It's no big deal. Shirley, you two hanging out just doesn't sit right with me. You're my sister and he's my husband. I thought we shared a deeper bond. She folded her arms and challenged. And why should it be a problem if I'm close to Wyatt? You should trust me. This answer triggered a fiery argument between us. Accusations and harsh words flew back and forth, and it all culminated when Shirley hurled an insult that stung more than I cared to admit. Wyatt was right about you. You are a judgmental bee. The rage I felt at that moment was like a tidal wave of anger and hurt. I watched my sister storm off, feeling a storm of sadness and anger brewing inside me. It was unfathomable how the two people I loved the most were suddenly turning against me. The thought of losing both my sister and my husband was unbearable, and I was left with a heavy heart and a sense of betrayal that would be difficult to mend. With Shirley and me not on speaking terms, the tension in the house reached unbearable levels. It was as if I was walking on eggshells, trying not to set off any more landmines in our fractured relationship. Wyatt was growing increasingly frustrated by the strife between us, and I could see how it weighed on him. One day, as I was relaxing at home, Wyatt suddenly burst through the door, his voice brimming with anger. "Sally, you're an awful sister. I can't believe you." I was taken aback. "What's going on, Wyatt? Why are you so upset?" He explained, his frustration evident. "I just came back from being with Shirley, and she's not herself. She's sad and mopey, and I had to pry it out of her. She finally broke down and said that she'd had an argument with you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So she told you I was the one at fault?" He nodded, confirming that Shirley had shared her perspective of the argument, and he was convinced she was feeling hurt. And that's when I started raising my voice. "You don't even know the whole story. I'm sure Shirley twisted things." Wyatt's anger flared as he scolded me. "That doesn't matter. It's how she feels, Sally. You can't just invalidate her emotions." I felt the weight of his words, but I couldn't help but question him, my voice trembling. "But what about my emotions, huh? Why are you running to my sister before you talk to your wife?" Before I could give him a chance to answer, I asked him, "Do you love her?" Wyatt hesitated before whispering a soft no. I knew he was lying. His unwillingness to say it outright stung me to the core, and that moment I felt so alone, so betrayed. Tears streamed down my face as I yelled at Wyatt, "Get out! If you're always going to choose her side and never hear me out, then go back to her. You're not welcome here." Our home had turned into a battlefield, and it seemed that no matter how much I loved Wyatt, our relationship was cracking under the pressure of a sisterly bond that was now at odds with our marriage. As he left, I was left with a profound sense of despair, questioning whether we could ever regain the harmony we once had. 2 weeks had passed, and Wyatt hadn't returned home. There was a deafening silence in the house. No messages, no phone calls, nothing. The void in my heart seemed to grow with every passing day, and I cried myself to sleep every night, not realizing how dark and lonely my life had become. Then one day my phone pinged with a message from Wyatt. My heart raced as I saw his name on the screen, but the message was like a punch to the gut. "I want a divorce." Just 5 simple words, and it crushed me. The shock of it all left me breathless, and I couldn't fathom why he was being so cruel and distant. I wondered why he had married me if he harbored such deep feelings for Shirley. I felt like a fool for ever trusting him and not seeing the warning signs earlier. The pain was unbearable, but I felt so defeated that I didn't even want to fight for him anymore. I thought it was best to part ways amicably to minimize the agony. Our divorce process happened fairly quickly, as we had little to contest. Shortly after, about 2 months after it ended, I noticed a post from Shirley on social media declaring her marriage to Wyatt as the longtime friend and love of her life. It was confirmation of my worst suspicions. She had treated me as if I were expendable, a pawn in their relationship, and it made me sick to my stomach. I vowed never to speak to Shirley or Wyatt again. The hurt ran deep, and I wanted nothing more to do with them. Despite the immense sadness, I was determined to pull myself out of this abyss. I focused on my healing, tried to regain my sense of self and rebuild my life. Then, 7 months after the divorce, out of nowhere, Wyatt sent me a cruel and snarky test. "Guess I chose the better sister. Your parents couldn't even leave you anything when they died. They gave everything to Shirley and nothing to you. Serves you right for all the crap you've done to hurt your sister." I was stunned. My parents were very alive and well. It was a lie, a vicious taunt, and it cut deep. But if his wish was to hurt me, it was such a weird way to go about things. I couldn't believe the audacity of Wyatt's text. It had cut me deeply, but I knew I had to move on. To distract myself, I decided to check in on my parents, whom I hadn't heard from in over a year. They had gone off the grid to live in a rural spiritual settlement where they practiced meditation and mindfulness. The only contact they allowed was in cases of emergency. I'd considered reaching out when I was getting a divorce, but I felt my story was too sad and disruptive to their peaceful commune. However, after Wyatt's text, I needed to confirm my parents' well-being. Maybe he knew something I didn't. I was so freaking scared and I had to make sure they were okay. So I called the emergency number they'd provided and my heart raced as I waited for a response. When my parents' voices finally came through the line, I couldn't hold back my emotions any longer. I broke down and poured my heart out, telling them everything that had transpired over the past 10 months, the heartbreak, the strained relationship, and even the lie Wyatt had told about them. But it was my parents who dropped a shocking revelation. They explained that it was Shirley's biological parents who had tragically passed away and left her a meager inheritance of some trinkets. In reality, her parents hadn't been wealthy, but Wyatt must have mistakenly assumed that they were my biological parents, unaware that Shirley was adopted. As I heard this, I couldn't help but laugh, not because it was funny, but because I was taken aback by the sheer blunder. Wyatt's misunderstanding had fueled his resentment and cruelty towards me, and Shirley's own assumption had inadvertently fueled his misinformation. It was a bizarre chain of events that had led us all to this point, where I had been unfairly demonized and excluded from their lives. Still bewildered by the bizarre turn of events, I decided to call Shirley to gain some clarity on this mess. She answered the call with a tone of sadness, likely overwhelmed by the loss of her biological parents, whom she hadn't had a chance to reconnect with properly. I extended my condolences to her, and then I said that I wanted to talk to both her and Wyatt. She obliged, putting her phone on speaker. I couldn't hold back my frustration, letting Wyatt know that his text was cruel and inaccurate, though I was relieved that it wasn't true. "Sally, what is this all about?" "You're so stupid it actually hurts knowing that I ever shared my life with you. What you texted was so evil and inaccurate, so I came to embarrass the both of you." "Sally, please, I'm mourning." "I don't care. You two ruined my life. Before I ever speak to you again, I need you all to know the truth." I asked Wyatt to repeat what he said when he texted, and Shirley was confused. She asked him what he meant when he said that Sally's parents were dead. He sheepishly said that that was what she told him, that her parents died, so obviously that meant that Sally was also mourning. Shirley, her voice tinged with frustration and disappointment, began to speak, directing her words at Wyatt, who sat there seemingly flabbergasted. "Wyatt, how many times have I told you about my past and my family and everything else? It's like you've got this selective hearing, only catching a fraction of what I say. Is it really so hard to pay attention when someone's sharing their life with you? For the millionth time, Sally's parents are my adoptive parents, not my biological parents." The atmosphere grew tense, with all of us silently acknowledging the damage caused by Wyatt's inattentiveness. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of empathy for Shirley. Despite our previous disagreements, we had both been wronged in different ways by Wyatt's lack of understanding and attention. I then inquired about Wyatt's earlier statement regarding my not getting any inheritance. He mentioned that Shirley had told him I wouldn't receive anything from it. "Yeah, you idiot, she wouldn't inherit anything from my parents because they're not her parents." And if we're talking about inheritance, I should also mention that you're no longer in the will, Shirley. I told Mom and Dad everything, and they're beyond disgusted. You should expect a call from them soon. Wyatt tried to apologize, but the situation was rather awkward. I couldn't help but find some satisfaction in watching his ignorance unravel. I couldn't resist the urge to tell Wyatt he was an idiot. With that, I wished them a happy marriage and a nice life, and then I ended the call. As I disconnected, I could hear them bickering through the phone before the line finally cut. I couldn't help but laugh, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. It was clear that they weren't truly happy with each other, and my small revenge had brought me some much-needed closure. Hey you all, I'm Rebecca and I'm 65 years old. I never thought that I could divorce my husband Tyler. We had been together for so long, and despite the love we had for each other, it fizzled out. I still couldn't imagine life without him. But when I turned 35, I found the strength to file for divorce. Things were going to get nasty between us, but then something awful happened. Tyler got into a car accident while he was on his way to fix things between us. The accident rendered him paralyzed from the waist down, and he needed help with everything, and I mean everything. I felt terrible for him and decided to stay with him, even though it was against my better judgment. After all, I was technically responsible for it. Slowly but surely, after deciding to work things out with him, I was just becoming a live-in nanny for him and not his actual wife. He was going through a lot, and I could understand that. But he had just become so rude and bitter after the accident. There were many occasions when we would fight, and Tyler would say that he felt resentful towards me because of what I put him through, blaming me for everything. I would suggest separating again, but Tyler would call me selfish for proposing something like that because he had no one to take care of him. This led us to stay in this constant cycle of abuse and verbal altercations, and I was tired of him. I couldn't take it anymore. Becoming the breadwinner was never something I had planned for myself, but it happened by proxy of my husband, Tyler, losing his job due to his accident. Since he couldn't work at a regular job or perform any tasks that require technology, the burden fell on me to keep us afloat. Tyler struggled with the loss of his job and the sense of usefulness that had consumed him. He would often fall into depressive episodes, refusing to eat or take care of himself. His misery was palpable and it was painful to watch. One day, I had a bright idea to involve him in my work. I asked him if he would be interested in helping me draft proposals, read articles, and work on assignments. I thought this would give him something productive to do and perhaps even help us bond and rekindle the spark we had lost. The arrangement seemed to work initially. Tyler's involvement in my work gave him a sense of purpose and filled some of the void left by his inability to hold a traditional job. It was also a way for us to spend more time together. However, over time, Tyler's attitude began to change. He became increasingly bossy, constantly telling me how to do my job, what I should write, and how to structure my proposals. He started acting like he was an expert in my field and that he knew better than I did. It rubbed me the wrong way, and I couldn't help but resent the unsolicited advice and his snobbish behavior. I had invited him into my professional world as a way to bridge the emotional gap between us, but it seemed to have backfired. The more involved he became, the more our relationship suffered. Our attempts to connect and rekindle what we had lost only seemed to push us further apart. I was beginning to question if there was any way to salvage the love and companionship we had once shared. It was another typical evening with Tyler. As I was hunched over my desk, typing away, he couldn't resist the urge to nag and preach about how I should be doing my work. "Rebecca, I think you should consider restructuring the proposal like this," he said, pointing to my screen. "It'll make it more impactful, you know." I sighed, trying to keep my irritation in check. "Tyler, I appreciate your advice, but I've been doing this job for years. I know what I'm doing." He slumped in his wheelchair, a hint of sadness clouding his face. "I just want to feel useful, Rebecca. It's been so long since I felt like I contributed to anything. I miss that." I felt a pang of guilt as I watched his tears well up. It had been a while since he'd expressed such vulnerability. I knew how hard his life had become since the accident. But this was the first time he had admitted how useless he felt. I understand, Tyler, I really do. If giving me advice on my work makes you feel more impatient, then I'll accept it, even if it's unsolicited. A relieved smile touched his lips. Thank you, Rebecca. It means a lot to me. I don't want you to think I'm just being bossy or critical. I nodded, softening my tone. I know you're just trying to help. From that point on, I let Tyler take on the role of my unofficial work consultant. He'd give me advice, suggest revisions, and share his thoughts on various projects. It wasn't always easy, as his recommendations sometimes felt overbearing, but I knew it was essential for his self-esteem. Over time, Tyler seemed to gain some sense of purpose and fulfillment. He no longer broke down in despair as much, and our arguments became less frequent. We had both made sacrifices for our relationship, and if this was what it took to help him find a sense of worth, then I was willing to endure his nagging and unsolicited advice. But obviously, this was taking a toll on me, and it turns out you can't keep piling on emotional labor on someone. One day, their back will break. Tyler's newfound involvement in my work started as a well-intentioned effort to boost his self-esteem, but it quickly evolved into an overwhelming and contentious part of our relationship. Even after that initial discussion, I had to constantly bite my tongue, as Tyler became increasingly critical and demanding. "You're late to work again, Rebecca," he chastised me one morning. "You can't afford to be lazy, you know. You have a job to do." I gritted my teeth, trying to maintain my composure. His comments always stung, and I felt like he was doing it on purpose, but I had grown accustomed to these outbursts. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had a peaceful morning without his relentless reminders. The fights between us had become more frequent. I tried to avoid confrontation, but Tyler was volatile, and it was impossible to predict what might set him off. Walking on eggshells had become a daily routine, and it was exhausting. Sometimes I found myself reporting to lies just to escape the relentless pressure. I'd tell Tyler I had to go on a work trip when in reality I just needed a break from his constant presence and unsolicited advice. It was my way of seeking respite and reminding myself of the life I used to have, free from this oppressive dynamic. Whenever I mustered the courage to ask Tyler to reduce his involvement in my work life, it would inevitably lead to another breakdown. He'd call himself useless and utter self-deprecating comments that were painful to hear. At first, I would worry, rushing to console him, but over time, I became desensitized to his words as he repeated them like a broken record. I had shouldered most of the emotional labor in our relationship, and it was becoming a heavy burden to bear. As I watched happy couples on the street reminiscing about my younger, carefree days, I couldn't help but feel a growing resentment towards my husband. It wasn't his paralysis that fueled my resentment. It was the emotional turmoil and constant scrutiny that had taken over our lives. The love we once shared had dissipated, replaced by a sense of frustration. I was suffocating in my own life, trapped in a never-ending cycle of emotional turmoil. The woman I once was had vanished, replaced by the weary caretaker of an ailing and bitter husband. It was a life I could have never anticipated or desired. As I reached my 60s, I'd stopped complaining altogether. There was a sense of resignation that had settled within me. When Tyler would argue or berate me, I would nod or admit he was right, hoping to avoid confrontations and maintain a semblance of peace. Tyler, however, latched onto my compliance, using it as a tool to assert his dominance further. He'd become even more demanding, insisting that I work harder and make more money. I was no longer a spring chicken, and there were days when I would fall ill, hoping for some understanding and compassion, but Tyler showed neither. He expected me to cater to him while simultaneously generating income. Hopelessness engulfed me, and I spiraled into a deep depression. There were days when I didn't have the strength to get out of bed, unable to bear the weight of my life. During one of these spells, I holed up in my room for 2 days, despite Tyler banging on the door. In a moment of panic, convinced I had passed away, Tyler called 911. The police forcibly entered the room and found me alive, but looking as if I was slowly wasting away due to my overwhelming misery. Admitted to a psychiatric ward, I spent days receiving counseling and therapy, which offered a brief respite from the relentless pressure at home. I wished that those days could have stretched on forever, away from Tyler's constant bitterness and complaints. Upon my return, I couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia for those few days of peace. Tyler had resumed his usual routine, and I was left wondering if there would ever be an escape from the bleak reality of our lives. 5 more years had passed, and now I had reached the age of 65. Retirement was finally within my grasp, a time to enjoy the fruits of my labor, and at last find some relaxation in my life. I mustered the courage to mention my retirement plans to Tyler, hoping he would understand the need for this transition. However, his reaction was far from what I expected. He erupted, his voice thundering with anger as he accused me of being selfish. Confused and taken aback, I asked him why he was so livid. He didn't mince words, berating me for considering retirement. According to him, he needed me to continue working to cover his mounting medical bills and household expenses. Tyler argued that there was no way we could sustain ourselves on my pension alone, and he demanded that I remain employed. In his eyes, I was the sole financial lifeline, and he clung to the belief that my continued labor was necessary for our survival. Part of me wanted to reveal a hidden fact I'd kept for years, that I had a robust Roth IRA and a substantial pension fund. I had invested diligently from the age of 35, right around the time we had contemplated divorce, which is why he didn't know about it. But the chaotic path our life took after we reconciled had pushed that information aside because we had bigger fish to fry, obviously, and I hadn't seen the need to share it with Tyler. Now, as he berated me for my alleged selfishness, the opportunity to divulge the truth presented itself. However, something about his selfishness, his anger, and his ungrateful attitude held me back. It seemed that my sacrifices, care, and support for him over the years had gone unnoticed, unacknowledged, and unappreciated. The idea of providing more financial security when I had already given so much was a breaking point. I exploded, releasing years of pent-up frustration. The emotions I had kept suppressed for so long burst forth, and I confronted him. I labeled him as selfish and ungrateful, reminding him of the sacrifices I had made throughout our tumultuous journey. Tyler, you ungrateful pig. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for you. I've wasted the last 30 years dealing with your BS. I've given you everything. And this is how you repay me? With insults and accusations? How dare you? You're nothing without me. You realize that. You'd be rotting in your own misery if it weren't for my care and support. I've bent over backwards to cater to your every need, and this is how you treat me. You think you can just demand and expect me to be at your beck and call? Well, you've got another thing coming. You better start showing some respect, or maybe I should just leave you to rot all on your own. You can see how well you fare without the lazy and selfish wife you seem to think I am. The weight of my words hung in the air, echoing in the room. It was a moment of reckoning, and I had finally found my voice, asserting my worth and demanding the respect I had long deserved. You'd think that after an ear beating like that, he would finally shut up and stop his crap. But boy, oh boy, was I wrong. Tyler's voice was charged with frustration as he retaliated. Oh, so you want me to rot? Well, that's rich coming from the woman who thinks her retirement should mean I suffer. He couldn't contain the hurt and anger anymore, letting his words flow freely. You've done nothing but hold me back and make me feel miserable. I wish I had a wife who hadn't let herself go, who had enough money to take us on vacations and make our lives better. Everything is your fault. I wouldn't be in this damn wheelchair if you hadn't tried to end things with me so prematurely, trying to throw away our marriage like it was nothing. But now I'm suspecting that you might have been right. I couldn't believe the audacity of Tyler. After our heated argument, he had the nerve to wake me up in the morning by splashing water on my face. I was furious, my emotions still raw from the fight the night before. I yelled at him, demanding to know what he thought he was doing. Tyler, with a smug expression, told me that I needed to get up and head to work. He insisted that I had to inform my company that I wasn't retiring yet, and that I would work for a few more years. I was baffled and disheartened because I had already put in my notice, and he knew that. His next words left me in shock. He threatened to kick me out of our home if I didn't comply. I never imagined that he would resort to such an extreme measure just because I wanted to retire and enjoy the later years of my life. Instead of arguing with him or begging for his forgiveness, I decided to take him seriously. I began to calmly pack up my belongings, believing that it was time to finally put an end to our tumultuous relationship. Tyler had pushed me beyond my limits, and I couldn't take it anymore. As I methodically packed my things, Tyler started to realize the severity of the situation. He desperately pleaded with me, apologizing, telling me how much he needed me, but it was too late. I had given him years of my life, and he had drained me emotionally and mentally. There was nothing left for me to offer. I knew it was time to leave him behind and seek happiness and peace on my own. Tyler had chosen his path, and I was choosing mine. As I packed my things, my heart ached, and I felt a growing sense of sadness for the life we had once shared. Tyler, who had previously seemed so determined to push me away, was now crumbling before my eyes. Rebecca, please listen to me. I'm so sorry for everything I said. I didn't mean it. I just wanted to get a reaction out of you. But I don't want you to leave. I need you in my life. I've been so foolish and selfish. I didn't realize how much you mean to me. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he reached out to hold my arm, as if afraid that I would disappear forever. His voice had lost its edge, replaced by genuine remorse and vulnerability. I didn't want to kick you out. I was just angry and hurt. I didn't want you to retire because I just feel like everything is going out of control, and for a long time, this has been the only thing I could control. I've been taking out my frustration on you, and it's not fair. Please, Rebecca, don't go. We can work this out. I promise I'll change. I'll be better. Just don't leave me. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, and it tugged at my heartstrings, but I had reached my breaking point after years of being the one who held our relationship together. I knew it was time for me to put myself first, even if it meant leaving Tyler behind. After a month of solitude in that charming little apartment, I finally decided it was time to reveal the truth to Tyler. I had been ignoring his calls. My silence was a testament to how tired I was of his constant nagging and guilt-tripping. Every call he made sounded desperate, but I remained resolute. For years I'd played the role of an obedient wife and caregiver, sacrificing my happiness. No more. It was time for him to understand the consequences of his actions, and my choice to put myself first. The moment his call came through again, I took a deep breath and answered. Tyler's voice was a mix of despair and frustration as he said, Rebecca, please, can we talk? I miss you. I can't do this without you. It was time to clear the air, to reveal the secret that I'd kept from him all these years. I took a deep breath and continued. Tyler, listen to me. I've kept something from you, and it's time for you to know. Me retiring wasn't going to leave us struggling. I have a substantial Roth IRA, and we would have been just fine. I kept it from you because I was tired of being mistreated and treated like a doormat. I was going to tell you the day you lashed out on me, but I decided not to because I was sick of your crap. The line went silent, save for Tyler's muffled sobs on the other end. His apologies were tinged with genuine remorse, and he admitted, "If I had known about the Roth IRA, I would never have spoken to you like that. I'm so sorry, Rebecca." But that was precisely the issue I couldn't ignore. I replied firmly, "That's the problem, Tyler. You had no right to treat me that way, whether or not you knew about it. I'm not coming back. I want to live the rest of my days without the constant worry and feeling like I'm being taken for granted." Tyler pleaded, begged, and tried to convince me to return. He even promised he'd change, but I knew that change was rarely that simple. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of my own decisions, and I embraced a newfound sense of freedom. Staying alone in the cozy apartment had given me a taste of a life I'd almost forgotten. The life I had sacrificed for a husband who had grown entitled and bitter over the years. It was a life where I could set my own course, answer to no one, and prioritize my happiness. As the days passed, my resolve to stand my ground remained unshaken. I wasn't going to let guilt or fear force me back into a situation I had endured for far too long. The realization that I deserved happiness and peace was my guiding light, and it would lead me to a life that didn't revolve around someone else's needs. Over the next few months, I began to rebuild my life. It was challenging, but the freedom I gained was worth every ounce of effort. I rekindled old friendships and discovered new hobbies. It was as though life had handed me a fresh start, and I was determined to make the most of it. Meanwhile, Tyler faced the consequences of his actions. The tables had turned, and the roles had reversed. He struggled with daily life, grappling with the difficulties of caring for himself in his condition. In the absence of the partner he had mistreated for so long, he was forced to confront the harsh reality of life without my support. But I couldn't help him anymore. My priority was me, and the years I had spent putting his needs ahead of my own were over. I felt no bitterness, only the sweet taste of independence. In my new life, I found the happiness and peace I had been yearning for. The burden that had weighed me down for so long had been lifted, and I reveled in the freedom to live life on my own terms. As time passed, I came to realize that it wasn't too late to start anew, to rediscover the passions and dreams I had once set aside. The world was wide open with opportunities, and I had the agency to seize them despite my old age. Hey guys, I'm Sadie and I'm 34 years old. I've always had a knack for finding that perfect balance between petty and justified. You know, back in high school, I was the unofficial queen of pettiness. I wasn't someone who would back down easily when someone wronged me, so when it came to dealing with my husband Charles's family, I had a special set of skills to keep things in check. Charles and I were a perfect match. He was the calm, introverted one, and I was the fiery, outspoken extrovert. It was like we were made for each other. However, things became complicated when it came to his mother, Beatrice, and his sister, Adeline. Beatrice, my mother-in-law, was a strict, no-nonsense lady. She had high expectations for her family and was never shy about voicing her complaints. She had a way of making any issue seem like a life or death situation. There was just no satisfying her, and she was always ready to confront someone if things didn't go her way. Then there was Adeline, Charles's younger sister. She had inherited her mother's confrontational nature and the art of being spoiled. It seemed like she believed the world owed her something, and she had mastered the art of making demands. As if Charles hadn't warned me enough, I soon found out that Charles's family gatherings were always an adventure filled with endless complaints and confrontations. Beatrice and Adeline seemed to thrive on it, like they were energy vampires. They were like a tag team, always finding someone to be upset about. It was exhausting. Over the years, I honed my skills in dealing with their drama. I had to navigate the stormy waters of family gatherings with poise and sometimes, yes, a little pettiness. But it was all in good fun, and it was the only way to survive the emotional roller coaster that was Charles's family. I knew how to maintain my cool and hold my ground when they tried to push my buttons. I had mastered the art of passive aggressiveness, and I was ready to serve a fresh slice of petty whenever necessary. It wasn't about winning arguments or battles. It was about protecting my sanity. Our conversations would look something like this. Sadie, darling, this chicken is quite dry. I hope your kitchen skills are better than this. Yeah, and your place could use some tidying up. I thought we were going to have dinner in a clean home. Well, Beatrice, if the chicken isn't to your liking, you're welcome to bring your own next time. I'd hate to burden you with a dry meal. And Adeline, I'm sure you could always stay at your pristine palace if my home doesn't meet your standards. Oh, I see you haven't lost your sharp tongue, Sadie. Don't try to be funny, Sadie. We're just giving you some friendly advice. And I'm just returning the favor, dear. It would become a shouting match at some point, and Charles would have to step in and de-escalate things. Let's just say that people with a high school bully mentality and someone like me just don't mix well. Charles and I always shared a dream of having a bigger house. We were hard workers, committed to our vision of success. Our plan was to start our own business and step away from the daily grind of working for others. We believed that with determination and effort, we could shape our future just the way we wanted it. Our journey began with an Etsy shop, offering a variety of handcrafted items from jewelry to knitted goods. We also ventured into drop shipping, which allowed us to expand our product range without the need for physical inventory. Beyond that, we dreamed of creating our own line of perfumes and colognes once we achieved greater stability. We were the perfect team, driven by ambition and dedication, always looking for opportunities to turn our dreams into reality. However, our enthusiasm wasn't met with support from my in-laws. Beatrice and Adeline, which surprised literally no one because they're just haters. Despite all our budding achievements, they were quick to criticize our business ventures. It felt like every milestone we reached was met with skepticism and criticism, which was not at all constructive. Their words and attitudes seemed almost designed to undermine our confidence. Adeline's condescending tone was hard to ignore. She would often say things like, "You really believe you can make a living selling handcrafted items online? That's adorable." I couldn't help but wonder why they seemed so determined to knock us down. Were they jealous? Or did they prefer that Charles continue his corporate career? We had worked tirelessly to build our business and prove its viability. The lack of support from Beatrice and Adeline was frustrating and disheartening. Hating me was one thing, but also hating on your own son, brother? These women were miserable. Charles and I discussed our feelings and struggles with his family's lack of encouragement. Together, we reminded each other of our achievements and the satisfaction that came with being our own bosses. We decided to focus on the progress we had made and the positive aspects of our journey. Our business was growing, and we believed in its potential. Charles, I can't stand the way your sister and your mom always belittle us and criticize everything we do. I know, Sadie, but I've been dealing with that my entire life. I've grown used to it. Well, that doesn't mean you should just accept it. We're working hard to achieve our dreams, and we don't need their negativity. You need to talk to them. Bold of you to assume they'd even listen to me. Babe, I know you're not super confrontational, but I think it's high time you take some action. If they're not listening to you, then maybe it's time we distance ourselves from them. I don't think I could ever cut them off, though. They're family. Charles, you've got to remember that blood isn't always thicker than water. If they're toxic and holding us back, maybe we need to distance ourselves from them for the sake of our dreams. I hear what you're saying, but it's just not that simple. We can't let them hinder our success. It's time to stand up for ourselves and our future, no matter who it is we have to stand up to. Charles would always say things like this, and bless his soul, he just couldn't imagine letting go of his toxic family. I could understand it, but I always encouraged him to think deeply about the type of people he wanted to keep in his life. Nonetheless, Beatrice and Adeline's skepticism was a test of our determination. Despite their lack of faith in our dreams, we had each other and we believed in ourselves. We would continue to push forward and prove that we were on the right path, even if it meant disapproving our own family members. A couple of years passed, and Charles and I were on top of the world. We had managed to turn our small business into a full-time gig, and it was a dream come true. We had put in the hard work and made sacrifices, and now we were reaping the rewards. Our friends and family were thrilled for us, constantly congratulating us on our accomplishments. Well, everyone except for Adeline and Beatrice, Charles's mother and sister. It didn't surprise me one bit. It seemed like they had always been waiting to see us fail, and when that didn't happen, they couldn't even muster a word of support. Charles was hurt by their indifference, and he'd often come to me to complain. He couldn't understand why they refused to acknowledge our success. It baffled him, because he'd always wanted recognition and praise from his family, especially his mother. He believed that once he'd achieved this level of success, she would finally be proud of him. I tried to comfort him, but I couldn't help but feel frustrated by his expectations. I had seen how Adeline and Beatrice treated us over the years, always undermining our goals and dreams. I asked Charles why he was so surprised. These women had never been supportive, and I couldn't understand why he still sought their approval. Charles explained that despite everything, he had held onto the hope that our success would finally earn him the recognition and love he'd always craved from his family. He longed for his mother's approval, and he couldn't help but hope that this would be the moment she'd change. I put my arm around him, trying to provide comfort. Charles, you need to understand something. Your mother and your sister aren't good people. We've seen how they've treated us, how they've tried to bring us down. Their lack of support now doesn't change who they are. You're an incredible person, and your worth shouldn't be defined by their approval or disapproval. Charles nodded, and I could see the struggle in his eyes. Breaking free from the need for his family's validation wasn't easy, but I knew he was capable of it. He had built something wonderful with me, and that success should be enough for anyone. Another year rolled by, and Charles and I had managed to save up enough money for a down payment on our dream house. It was a beautiful home with 6 rooms, 7 bathrooms, a pool, and a hot tub. The neighborhood was ideal, and we couldn't believe our luck. We decided to get a mortgage just to be on the safe side. And with all the paperwork in place, we finally signed the deal and moved into our new home. It was a dream come true, and we couldn't be more grateful. We shared our journey and experiences through vlogs, updating our loved ones on the progress and updating the family group chat. The praise and congratulations poured in from friends and family, all except for Adeline and Beatrice. Their lack of support and approval was par for the course. However, this time, Charles didn't seem to be as affected as before. He had come to realize that seeking validation from people who were always unsupportive was a losing battle. It was a realization that made me proud of him. Adeline and Beatrice noticed the change in Charles. He wasn't constantly vying for their attention and validation anymore. This shift was unsettling to them, as they were accustomed to his updates and reports on his life. However, they couldn't ignore our new home, so it was me who broke the news to them. With a sense of accomplishment, I typed out the message and sent it to the family group chat, sharing our excitement about the new house. Their response was chilly, but Charles remained unfazed. I was having a peaceful afternoon when my phone rang. I saw Adeline's name on the caller ID. When I answered, I also heard Beatrice's voice was in the background, so they were together. They asked me why Charles wasn't talking to them as often as before, and I couldn't help but be candid with them. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that you two can be quite toxic for him. What? Toxic? How dare you? I'm pretty sure it's you who's the toxic one. He was never acting like this before he met you. You've poisoned him. No, all I did was tell him that he deserved to be around people who loved him and supported him. I guess he no longer thinks that you two fit the criteria. You think you're all high and mighty? You think you're better than us? Well, just wait and see. We'll get back at you for trying to turn Charles against us. You should be upset because he's finally realized his worth. It's about time he stopped seeking validation from people who have always been unsupportive. You both are awful, and I'm glad I didn't grow up with such hateful and unsupportive people. I wonder how Charles managed to be the sweetest and kindest man I know, considering he had people like you around him. I'm not scared of you two. Your days of bullying Charles and me are over. We're finally living in our dream home, far away from all the BS you bring. Adeline and Beatrice were furious, promising to ruin my life for what I had said. I didn't let their threats get to me and simply hung up the call, knowing that I no longer needed the toxicity in my life. After we'd kind of settled into our new home, there came a day that brought us an unexpected surprise. Adeline and Beatrice appeared at our front door. Charles, ever the friendly one, greeted them and invited them inside, but I remained cautious. I couldn't help but ask, "What are you doing here?" Their presence felt unusual, and I wasn't sure what to make of it. And that's when Adeline revealed that they had come to see the house and congratulate us on this major achievement. It was the first time we had ever received such support from Adeline and Beatrice, so we were really shocked. They seemed genuinely interested, complimenting the house and saying it looked like a vacation home. Charles was ecstatic to finally receive some praise and recognition, and he couldn't stop smiling. However, I couldn't help but feel skeptical and reserved. I whispered to Charles that I still didn't fully trust them, but I didn't want to dig too deep and put a damper on his happiness, so I put on a polite front for the day. Once Beatrice and Adeline left, we finally had some time alone to talk about what had just happened. You know, Sadie, I'm really glad my mom and sister finally came by. It feels like they're treating me with kindness and respect for the first time. Maybe this is the start of something new. Feels like they're turning a new leaf. It's nice that they dropped by, but I can't help but feel like there might be ulterior motives behind this sudden change. You're being a bit paranoid, don't you think? People can change, and maybe they're just trying to make an effort. I do believe people can change, but I find it hard to believe that they could change so quickly. I'm not saying I won't give them a chance, but I'll keep my guard up just in case. Suit yourself. As for me, though, I'm going to invite them for coffee tomorrow. The very next day, we gathered for that coffee date Charles had proposed. Unfortunately, during the day, Charles was called in to tend to a work emergency, leaving Beatrice, Adeline, and me alone together. Yay. And that's when I noticed the abrupt change in their demeanor. The nice girl act they had put on just the day before was gone. They began to shout insults at me, hurling words like daggers. I tried to keep my cool, but their behavior was unacceptable. I asked them to leave if they couldn't behave themselves, but that's when Beatrice dropped a bombshell. She said, "Actually, I don't think we will, because this house doesn't belong to you." I was taken aback. Confused by her statement, it didn't make sense. Adeline and Beatrice began to reveal their sinister plan, and it became clear that their earlier kind words had been nothing more than a facade. "What the hell are you talking about? You see, when we saw the pictures, we said that this was a really nice house. And we saw it in person yesterday. It looked even better. Needless to say, we really enjoy this house. In fact, we enjoy it so much that we think that it shouldn't belong to you." Excuse me? Did you do some drugs before coming here? I'm being serious, Sadie. I mean, really, think about it. After everything my daughter has accomplished, I think that this house belongs to her. What the hell is wrong with you? Why do you want to do this? I want it for Adeline because she deserves it more than Charles and you do. My jaw dropped. You're both going crazy if you think you can just take this house away from us. You'd better leave before I call the cops. Beatrice, however, remained unfazed. I don't need your permission, Sadie. I just need to convince Charles, and believe me, that won't be hard. He's always wanted our approval, and he'll do anything to get it. We'll get this house one way or another. You'd be better off putting Adeline's name on the deed now so we can move in and enjoy our new home. Their audacity left me speechless. They got up and they left, presumably to get ready to butter up my husband with their lies. Luckily for me, I had been recording the whole conversation. When Charles came home that night, I sat him down and recounted the entire ordeal with his mother and sister, emphasizing that they were a different breed of evil. I played the recording for him and he listened with growing anger and disappointment. He thought they were finally extending kindness, but it had all been a ploy to manipulate him into agreeing to their ridiculous proposal. I shared my plan to get back at them. We would agree to their demand of giving the house to Adeline, but we would also sign over the mortgage. They probably thought the house was fully paid for, but that wasn't the case. Charles agreed with the plan and admired my strategic thinking, so we set out to put it into action. Charles called Adeline and told her that the house would be hers by the end of the week. She should be prepared to move in, he said. Adeline and Beatrice were ecstatic, taking pleasure in rubbing it in my face, thinking they had the upper hand and had finally avenged my advice to Charles about valuing himself more and keeping toxic people out of his life, even if they were family. We continued to act oblivious, quickly moving back to our old home, which we took off the market. The charade was far from over, and we were determined to teach them that we weren't to be trifled with. Shortly after Charles and I handed over the house to Adeline, she was ecstatic, saying that Beatrice would be moving in with her soon. They couldn't wait to enjoy their new home. We continued to play along, acting oblivious and congratulating Adeline on the new house. We agreed with her when she said that she deserved it, even though we knew what was coming. A whole month went by and I started receiving a barrage of calls from both Adeline and Beatrice. Guess it was time to pay their dues. After a few ignored calls, I finally answered Beatrice's call. Sadie, do you know about the mortgage on this house? But of course. Thanks for covering it, by the way. Well, we can't afford this. What did you expect from such a lavish house? We thought the house was paid off. This is ridiculous. Why didn't you say anything? Why would I say anything? Your daughter was the homeowner after we signed her name on the deed. Why didn't you two check about the clauses and the agreements? I didn't think that this would happen. You have to help us, please. I couldn't help but laugh at Beatrice's naivety, which only angered her further. I seized the opportunity to let her in on the secret, revealing that Charles had been aware of all of this. The plan to bamboozle them and to laugh in their faces when they realized they were screwed. He knew everything. Beatrice was shocked to hear that her son had a hand in their predicament. If you mistreat someone enough times, they realize that they're better off without you. Can't say I didn't see this coming, and I can't say I'm sorry either. You two are horrible people, and you deserve to be humiliated and kicked out of my home. In the background, I could hear Adeline crying, not knowing what to do. The two of them had already sold their houses, and they couldn't get them back. Well, what the hell do you want us to do? Where are we supposed to go? I don't know, and I don't care. Leave me out of your BS. You brought this onto yourselves. But we have nothing. We don't have any money. You better find a way to make money then. Hey, I have an idea. What about drop shipping? With that, I hung up and shared the call's outcome with Charles. We both had a good laugh and felt a sense of satisfaction in the way things had turned out. Hello, my name's Mabel and I'm 48 years old. Only a few months ago I experienced something horrifying that led to me losing all contact with my son. Before I dive into that story, let me give you a little background on me and my son, Ned. I lost all use of my legs after a car crash when I was in college. It was a very hard time for me, and I lost a lot of friends after because I needed a lot of care and attention, something that not a lot of people were willing to give when they're in their prime years of college. Thankfully, I had my family by my side. They showed me how much family can do for you when you're at your lowest. I don't think I could have ever made it out alive if not for the support and care of my family. They renewed my sense of familial love, and it is because of them that I found it in my heart to adopt my son, Ned. I was gifted an apartment by my parents when I told them that I wanted to move out and live independently. I was around 27 by this point and more than used to being a disabled person. I knew my way around and I was confident that I was going to be able to live alone. My parents were never one to discourage me, and they found me a disabled-friendly apartment and bought it for me. About a year into living in my own new apartment, I opened my front door to a child standing in front of me. He was sobbing and telling me that his mother had left him there. My heart really broke for him, so I invited him in to wait at my place until his mother came back. A day passed, and then another, until it became pretty clear that his mother was never coming back. This boy's name was Ned, and I cared for him as much as I could. Ned began to warm up to me, and eventually I asked him if he would be okay with me adopting him. It had been a few months since he was living with me. I had alerted CPS in the first week of his arrival and worked out an arrangement with them that let him continue to live with me. Ned was ecstatic for me to adopt him, and so I did. I was so incredibly happy to be a mother. I never thought that I would have been able to experience the joys of being a mother, since I wasn't exactly in the best of places to even give birth. When Ned was 16, however, I began to notice a change in him. He became a lot more reserved and was very snappy with me. Every time I tried to ask him what was wrong, he'd get upset with me and tell me it was nothing. I chalked it up to him being a teenager, but this continued until he was 18. Right before Ned left for college, he told me that he wanted to find his real mother. I will not lie, but it broke my heart to hear him say that. It made me feel like I hadn't done enough for him. But I also knew better than to be selfish about his wants, so I assured him that he could do whatever he liked. Ned began to behave like his usual self after that, so clearly that was what was eating him up for so long. I was just happy that Ned was feeling better. In college, Ned met Violet, the woman who he was going to marry. Violet was, and still is, an amazing girl. She and I got along really well, and I was more than happy that Ned found himself such a good woman. They remained a couple for the next 6 years. Ned moved out to live with Violet, and after that, Ned barely spoke much to me, but Violet made sure to call me every week. I didn't mind because I figured that Ned was busy living his life. One day, Ned and Violet came over because they had something to tell me. "So, Mabel, we have something big to tell you." "Oh, really? What is it?" "Ned, do you want to tell her?" "No, it's okay. You go ahead and tell her." "All right. This past weekend, you know that Ned took me on a trip to the beach?" "Yes." "While at the beach, Ned proposed to me." "We're engaged." "Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. I'm so happy for both of you." "You are the first person who knows." "You told me before you told your parents, Violet?" "Of course. You're the most wonderful person, and you were the one that encouraged and supported Ned so much that he can now be who he is." "Oh, sweetie, that's so nice. I'm so grateful that you both care enough about me to do this." "Of course, Mom. I really am grateful for everything you've given me. You gave me a chance at life, and I'm sorry if I've been ungrateful in the past few years." "Oh, that's all right. I'm just happy that you've found your way in life and that you've found this precious woman to cherish and love." "You're too kind. We wanted to personally invite you to our wedding, so save the date for 6 months from now." "I'm so excited. But isn't 6 months a little too close to plan everything out?" "No, we just want to get married as quickly as possible. I mean, we've been together since freshman year of college. I don't think there's any need to wait any longer." "Besides, we're not planning on having a large wedding. It'll be a relatively small one with only our closest friends and family there." "Okay then. If you two need any help, and I mean any help, be it financially or otherwise, don't hesitate to ask me, okay?" "Of course, Mom." "Now, let's go celebrate." I was genuinely happy for Ned and Violet. I always wanted them to get married, but I held my tongue because I didn't want to intrude in their relationship. Also, being the first to be invited and told made me feel so incredibly special. Besides, I also got a sincere apology from Ned later, and I finally felt at ease. We went out to get some food and drinks after their announcement, and we had a good time. About a month after they announced their wedding, Ned came over to my place unannounced. He looked a little anxious, but I didn't address that immediately. I greeted him warmly. "Hey, sweetie, come in." "Hi, Mom. How are you?" "I'm doing good. What about you? Is everything okay?" "It actually is. I'm great, and so is Violet, although she is beginning to stress out about the wedding planning, but no matter what I say, she just doesn't seem to calm down." "Oh, don't worry about that. She probably just needs some time to get her ideas collected, so you guys can work towards them." "Yeah, I guess, but speaking of this wedding, it made me think of something, and I came up here because I wanted to talk to you about it." "Oh? What is it? Did something happen?" "Well, kind of, but not anything bad, obviously." "Okay, that's a relief, so tell me, what were you thinking about?" The more I thought about the wedding, the more it hit me how weddings are a family celebration, and that got me thinking about my birth mother. "Oh, okay." "I mean, no offense to you, Mom. I mean, you took me in and raised me, but I really did want to meet my birth mother. It's been decades since I last saw her. I don't even remember her face." "Sweetie, you don't have to defend yourself. I get it. It's beyond normal to be curious about your biological parents. I mean, I always knew the day would come when you would tell me that you wanted to meet them, and to be frank, I didn't think it would take you this long to talk to me about it." "Yeah, well, I managed to track down my mother." "Oh, where is she?" "Turns out she still lives in our city." "What?" "I know, right? She's been here the whole time, so I texted her on Facebook and she replied back almost immediately. We set up a date to meet after just a few minutes of catching up because We couldn't catch up 20 years over text. Okay. Did you meet her yet, or is this meeting set to happen soon? The meeting happened 2 days ago. I found out that my mother was in a tough spot when she had me and couldn't keep up with taking care of me, so she dropped me off at your place. But after about a year, she found a good man who was well off, and they got married. She has kids with him too, so that means that I have half siblings. How did finding out all of that make you feel? I mean, I was happy for my mother. She must have really gone through a lot to have to drop me off at a stranger's place, but it does suck that she never searched for me after. Did you tell her that? No, I'm more glad that I get to have a relationship now, anyway. I even invited her to our wedding. Oh, that's great. I'm just happy that you're happy. You seem upset. I told Violet that it would make you upset. She's the one who told me it would be wrong to blindside you at the wedding. No, I'm not upset. Just a little surprised, that's all. Okay, that's great. I can't wait for you to meet my mother. It's going to be a blast. Just you wait and see. I'm sure it will be. I will admit that I was beyond upset at what Ned had told me. First of all, the very fact that he did not plan on telling me about finding and inviting his birth mother to the wedding hurt me deeply. I didn't like that it took Violet to force him to do that. Secondly, I didn't like that his birth mother lived right here and never once tried to reach out to him. I think that told me enough about the woman's personalities and priorities, which is what made Ned's enthusiasm about developing a relationship with her even more hurtful. His birth mother instead found herself a rich man and had no problem raising his kids and not Ned. Don't get me wrong, I'm more than happy that I got to raise Ned, but I did not like how Ned could not seem to look past his birth mother's disgusting behavior. I didn't say anything to Ned about what I was feeling, mostly because I didn't want to ruin his happiness, and also because I didn't think it was right for me to tell him that I was worried that he would forget me if he became close with his birth mother. That didn't feel like an appropriate thing to say, but all the years of him being distant made me feel insecure and worried. But after Ned left that day, I consoled myself by reminding myself that at the end of the day, I knew that Ned would recognize the fact that I knew him better than anyone else, including his absent birth mother. Over the course of the next few months, I helped Violet and Ned plan their wedding to the best of my ability. Violet insisted that I be a part of the wedding planning too, because she involved her parents in it. Ned kept trying to involve his birth mother in it too, but she always flaked on us last minute. It would devastate Ned, but he would always pick himself up a few days later. It pained me to see him go through all of that. I wanted him to realize that his birth mother probably wanted nothing to do with him. But I didn't think it would look nice if I said it to him. I knew that he would think that I was jealous or insecure, and that was not a conversation that I wanted to have with him. Anyways, a few days before the wedding, his birth mother called him to tell him that she would not be able to make it because one of her children had a headache and she did not want to leave them alone. I had the unfortunate honor of watching Ned pick up that call because I was over at his place, helping Violet alter her wedding dress. I watched as Ned groveled with her to come to the wedding, but she claimed that she simply could not. It crushed Ned, but he refused to talk about it. I tried my best to be there for him. Finally, the day of the wedding arrived, and I went over to his house to make sure that everything was going smoothly, and also because Violet asked me to help her get dressed. At some point, Ned came to me and asked me if he could talk to me about something. He looked upset, and I figured it was going to be about his birth mother not attending, so I followed him to his room and asked him what was wrong. What is it? Is everything okay? We need to talk. Okay, tell me what's wrong. I've been thinking about this since Violet and I got engaged. Oh, sweetie, you can't possibly have cold feet right now. You've been with Violet for years and just because you get married, that won't change anything. Besides, no, that's not it. It just, I don't want you at our wedding. Excuse me? Look, don't take this personally, but you're not my real mom. And like Violet said, our wedding is only going to be for the closest of family and friends. How can you say that I'm not your real mom, Ned? I raised you. That does not make you my mother. So just because you found your real mother, you're throwing me out? When you put it that way, I sound like an awful person. What other way is there to put it? Besides, you can't just uninvite me on the day of your wedding. I can, and that's why I'm doing it. So if you could please just leave without any commotion. Did Violet also agree to uninvite me? No, she doesn't even know about any of this, which is why I'm asking you to quietly leave. If she doesn't know about it, then I don't see why I should leave. Whether you consider me your mother or not, you're my son. I want to be there to witness one of the biggest days of your life. I was afraid that you were going to be like this. I have no choice but to lock you in this room. Lock me? What are you talking about? Don't worry, I already stocked the room with food and water. I'll be back before the wedding ends, and I'll let you out. Just don't tell Violet anything. You can't lock me in here like I'm some animal. Is this really how you want to start your marriage? By lying to Violet? What will you even tell her about my absence? I'll just tell her that you had some pain and tearfully told me that you've got to go back home to rest. Anyway, I really have to run right now, so I can make it on time to the venue. Take care, okay? Oh, and here, let me grab this. Give me back my phone. Come back right now, young man. Don't you dare lock me in. Hello? I didn't know what to do. I was stuck in a small, locked room on the first floor of a house with absolutely no way to contact anyone. If there is one thing that you should know, it's that I developed pretty bad claustrophobia after my accident, something that Ned was very well aware of. Needless to say, I was panicking beyond belief. Before I knew it, I was sobbing. I could barely catch my breath and I was beginning to feel faint. I tried my best to calm down, but it wasn't working. I was in the room for about 15 minutes before Violet opened the door and looked shocked to see me there. Mabel, what are you doing here? Oh my gosh, are you okay? I don't know. I was so worried and scared. Why was the door locked from the outside? Here, have some water. Calm down a little. I'm right here. You're not alone anymore. Thank you so much, sweetie. I was genuinely terrified. You know me in small spaces. I do. That's why I'm freaking out. Who did this? I don't want to say anything out of fear of ruining your day. No, I will not let this slide. You need to tell me right now or I will call Ned here and we will wait until you tell us who did this to you. No, don't call Ned. What? Why? Ned was the one that locked me in here. What? Why would he do something so cruel to you? He told me that I wasn't his real mother, and since your wedding is only for close family, I'm not invited. Are you being serious? But you raised him. That man has known you as his mother since he was 5. I know. That's what hurt the most, even more than him locking me in here. The audacity of that man. This is the final straw. But wait. I'm confused. Did he not think that I would see you here after we came back? He said that he'd come back earlier and let me out. You know what? You're coming with me to the venue. I don't know if that's a good idea. I mean, Ned made it very clear that he didn't want me there. Who cares? The wedding is not happening anyway. What? No. You can't break my son's heart like that. I should never have said anything. Please, Violet, please don't do that to him. I'm sorry, Mabel, but I simply cannot marry a man who is so ready to toss the woman who raised him aside on his big day. He insulted you and locked you in here, and you're still showing him so much compassion and care. How can you do that? Like I told him, it does not matter whether he considers me his mom because he will always be my son. I love him so dearly, and the last thing I want is for him to have a bad time. Okay, then think about things from my perspective. If he could treat you, his mother, who he has known for 19 years, this way, and not even bat an eye at it, how will he treat me in the future? Would you be okay with him ever treating me in a similar manner? Absolutely not. You're too kind of a soul to ever go through this. And so are you. You need to teach him a lesson. He's your son and you need to discipline him. So are you coming with me or should I wheel you there regardless? All right, I'll come along. I was so beyond grateful for Violet and whatever led to her forgetting something back at home. I would have pretty much passed out if not for her return. I will admit that I did feel a tiny bit angry with Ned, though I was not nearly as much as Violet was. She was fuming. I could practically see steam coming out of her ears. My heart was racing as we approached the venue because I didn't know how Ned was going to react. I knew he was not a violent man, but after what he did to me, I wasn't that sure about it. I was only comforted by the fact that there would be a lot of people around me to witness whatever happened and stop Ned if he tried to do something. When we reached the venue, Violet asked me to go in first and told me that she would follow later. She wanted Ned to be surprised so she could walk in and cause a scene. She wanted to expose Ned to everyone there, so I wheeled myself in. Ned was talking to the priest at the altar, and when he saw me, he rushed over and in a hushed voice asked me what I was doing there. "Mom, what are you doing here? Who brought you here?" "I wanted to see." "Do you not care about what I want at all?" "Why should she, when you don't care about her at all?" "Violet, what are you talking about?" "I happened to go back home because I forgot something that I planned on giving you when we stood at the altar. Tell me why I find Mabel locked in the room there." "Violet, I love you, but you need to butt out of my family business." "What family? You told me that I wasn't your real mom. Violet has every right to ask any question that she wants to. And if we get married, I will become a part of your family, which, by the way, includes Mabel. I mean, how dare you leave your disabled and claustrophobic mother locked in our room on the first floor? What would you have done if something serious happened to her?" "Stop overreacting. Nothing would have happened to her." "Do you really feel absolutely no remorse for what you did?" "I mean, like I explained, she's not my real mother. I told her that and explained that it was the reason that I didn't want her here. I asked her not to come, but she insisted on coming, so I did what I had to do." "Where is your real mother, Ned? Huh? You care so much about your biological mother who abandoned you, and not about the woman who took you in and raised you." "Oh, save me the sob story. It's my wedding and I get to decide who I want to be here and who I do not." "So I have no say in things at all. Should I have contacted your real mother? Oh, my bad. She didn't have the time to abandon her rich husband and 4 other kids to come here. You know who showed up for you? Mabel." "There's no need to drag my real mother into this, Violet. Can we just carry on with the wedding? We'll talk about this later." "No, absolutely not. I'm not marrying you. In fact, Mabel and I are going to go out right now. I wish you nothing but the worst, Ned." Violet grabbed the handles of my wheelchair and wheeled me out. I was sobbing because I could not believe how low Ned fought. Everyone in the room heard what happened between Ned and Violet, and every single one of them looked horrified. Violet took me to a cafe where we just sat in silence for a while, processing what had just happened. Then Violet turned to me and began to apologize profusely for the way that Ned had treated me. In turn, I apologized for being the reason that her relationship ended. We ended up reminding each other that Ned was to blame and not each other. Over the course of the next week, Violet ended up breaking up with Ned and threw him out of her house. I was happy that she was finally getting back on her feet. Ned called me up after that and began yelling at me. "Are you happy?" "Whoa, why are you screaming?" Why shouldn't I scream? You ruined the biggest day of my life and turned everyone against me. I did not do anything like that, Ned. You did this to yourself. No, I'm sure that you purposely did this to get attention on you. What are you talking about? Everywhere we go, everyone always flocks to you. I just wanted one day for myself, and you ruined that. Like you ruined everything all throughout my life. Do you really think that, Ned? I am a disabled person. Of course, people are going to flock to make sure that I'm okay. I didn't mean to steal anything from you. Well, whether you wanted to or not, you did. And this is exactly why I did not consider you my mother. No mother ever takes things away from her child. Right. Because your real mother abandoning you at my doorstep is something that mothers do. You even stole my wife from me. Are you really not ashamed? I didn't steal Violet, who, by the way, is not your wife. She realized that she did not want to be in a relationship with a man who was so self-centered that he'd toss away his disabled mother on the day of his wedding. You are the reason that Violet is no longer in your life. Wow, you can't even take any accountability for what you did. No, Ned, that's something that you're struggling with right now. You need to sit down and really rethink the way you look at life. I did nothing but give you all I had, even when I didn't have enough. What you did to me was beyond disgusting, and until you get your act together to come and properly apologize to me, I don't want you to call me. Oh, I'm never calling you again. Words cannot begin to describe how hurt I felt when I heard what Ned had to say. I can't believe that he had always felt like I was robbing him of attention. I devoted my everything to him. I tried my best to make sure he had everything he wanted and more. I was there for him when he struggled and used the contacts I gained because of all my attention to get him places. I just cried for a long while after that conversation with Ned. I knew it was wrong, but I called Violet, only to see if she knew what had happened after we left the wedding venue. Apparently everyone tore into Ned for the way he treated me after they saw what had happened. Ned kept trying to defend himself, but no one really listened to him. Instead, they all filed out of the venue and Ned was left all alone. But the backlash ended up reaching everyone in Ned's life, and he got numerous calls and texts from family and friends calling him a jerk. While I do not like that Ned was being treated that way, it felt nice to know that I had so many people backing me up. Not to mention, I really hope that Ned takes this as a chance to reflect back on his words. As much as he hurt me, I still hope that he'll come back to me one day, even if it's not to apologize, just to talk to me. Violet and I continue to remain good friends. She comes over to my place every weekend and spends time with me. It was sad that my son's ex-fiancé cared more for me than my son, but I was just glad that somebody cared for me. I also got an outpouring of support from those who were at the wedding and others who heard about what happened. I don't really know what's happening with Ned, but I do know that he moved to another city to start over. I'm blocked everywhere and I can't get in touch with him in any way, but at least I have people telling me what's going on with him, and for now that's enough. It's been a few months since everything happened, and I must admit that I am a lot happier than I was before. I guess I don't have much to worry about right now, and that's a good feeling. Wish me the best of luck for the future. Thank you so much for listening to my story.